Hello and welcome to the FDT-TV podcast. I am Mike. I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm joined by the very lovely Ian Barker, who's a West Ham fan. Every week we get together to talk about things football, especially the Premier League, but other sporting events are available as well. Ian, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Yeah, it's good weekend in terms of footballing, not in terms of walking around and suffering after that. But it's good. It always brings a little bit of a sort of a pip to your step, doesn't it, when you win? Especially when it's not very often this season. But we won. We beat bottom of the table unconvincingly, but a win's a win.
Absolutely.
Win's a win.
Yes, it was. I think a very interesting weekend of football. Obviously, Arsenal have retained their 8-point gap at the top of the season, which I'll go over in a brief moment. Obviously, as you just mentioned, West Ham winning. I think two big pieces of news, which I think we'll start with actually. Obviously, Graham Potter got sacked by Chelsea at the weekend, and also Brendan Rodgers has quit his managerial or head coach / position at Leicester City. We have mentioned, or we have discussed Graham Potter, I think, at length. When he first got the job, kind of an interim period, and now obviously we're going to be discussing his ending. At the time, I think both of us were of the opinion that it was too big a job too soon. Some might say kind of like a little fish in a big pond. Are you surprised by the sacking at all?
Yes and no. It's an interesting one because the guy Todd Boehly took over. Obviously, is known for keeping managers in place for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He's thrown money at it, which doesn't always make it easier. They've brought in some good talent going forward, or for moving forward as a club. They've upset some of the regulars or the current squad, which doesn't help as well. But they're it's difficult, isn't it? Because they're playing a very attractive style of football, and when they do get going, the passing's good, the flow's good. They just can't score, and that was a problem he had at Brighton. Is they did the same thing. They just couldn't score. The fact they didn't bring in an out striker. I know they brought in João Felix, but they didn't bring Lukaku back. Would that have made a difference? Possibly not. It's one of those that Chelsea obviously had set targets and a set limit as to if we drop into the bottom half, he's got to go, and that's what's happened. Now, cast your mind back a little bit. When they were having a season like this before, they brought in Roberto Di Matteo, went on to win the Champions League for the first time. Not to say they can't do that. Obviously, they've got a difficult draw in Real Madrid, but they're not playing Real Madrid in the final, which is key because Real Madrid haven't lost in yonks in a European Cup final. I think it was to the point where they had their limit. As if we go below that, he's gone regardless. As a club the stature of Chelsea, I understand that. Had he been in charge under the previous regime, I don't think he would have got as much leeway. But by no means is going into that job an easy task for anyone who goes in now. It's the club's a mess at the minute, and it's going to take a little while to get right. Unfortunately, Potter, but I think it was coming, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, and I think even the group conversation with one of our friends who's a Chelsea fan, I think even he was starting to get to the end of his tether from the current regime, and it is obviously a sad time when a manager loses his job, because I think a lot of emphasis, and I think we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that there's only so much responsibility that is, or in fact, no, there's too much responsibility that's placed on a manager. Now, I think if you I think something needs to be done. If you've got a player that's not pulling their weight in training and obviously not putting in the performances on the pitch, there's got to be something surely where you can terminate their contract as well, because I mean, you look at Aubameyang. Obviously, he completely down tools at the end of his Arsenal career, and I think the way we were allowed to get around that is because of his his absence from the club, unauthorized absences, and all that sort of stuff. So we managed to. Well, you can see it in the documentary. They talk about when he obviously flew to Barcelona, some to see his mum. But obviously there was some shady backhanded deal being going on with Barcelona, and they were trying to make an agreement with Barcelona as well. But yeah, it's like, sorry, just going back to what I was saying about is quite sad when a manager loses his appointment, because if you've not got the players playing for you, regardless of who they are, your job is at risk. And I know it's your job to kind of coach the players and stuff like that, but I mean, not everyone gets on with each other. It's irrelevant. And at the end of the day, you've got a job to do. A manager, I think, can only do so much in terms of development and all this sort of stuff. And when you are winning games, everything is absolutely rosy. I mean, you look at the treatment that Arteta was getting at the back end of last year. Obviously, the players weren't putting in the performances, and I know, yes, he was picking the squads and stuff, but we were still struggling with the lack of quality in positions. But now, obviously, this season, because we've gone on such a fantastic run, he's the best thing since sliced bread. He's like up there with Pep Guardiola type of manager on one season. But yeah, it does frustrate me. But I mean, I was looking at the some stats earlier just in relation to Graham Potter. He's got a current win rate, or had a win rate under Chelsea of 31.8%, which averaged out to around about 1.27 points per game. Now, I know, obviously, we've already discussed his appointment. We thought it was too soon for him to go into the Chelsea position. Very difficult for him to turn down. Obviously, when you've got a big club kind of calling for you like that, that may be your one and only opportunity. But I think even Frank Lampard, a legend at Chelsea Football Club, obviously struggled as well, and obviously saw the back end of the Stamford Bridge doors hitting his arse on the way out. So I think with the level that Chelsea have been over the last few years, there's obviously that expectation to be on it. And I think because Graham Potter wasn't sacked possibly a few games ago, you would kind of think he was going to be given the time to kind of work with these players. There was a lot of players that were brought in the summer transfer window, and you can't expect them to kind of hit the ground running straight away when they've got to adapt to a new league, a new location. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be kind of taken into account. So I do feel a little bit sorry for him about that. I mean, do you think? Sorry, go on.
I was going to say it's a difficult one because he took over obviously from Thomas Tuchel, who was beloved by Chelsea fans, and that's the first time in a while they've really sort of resounded with a manager. So to follow in that footsteps is difficult in the period of transition of obviously the club being bought under circumstances that it would never have been sold on normally. Mm-hmm. And then the influx of new players as well. It's a very difficult transition period to be in, and in some senses, I'm gonna bring it up. It's a bit like David Moyes following from like Alex Ferguson. Not quite the same, but it's never gonna be what it was. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how good Moyes had done, he was never gonna reach the level of Ferguson, and same with Potter. He was never gonna be as beloved as Thomas Tuchel was, unless he went out and won everything in his first season.
Yeah.
The new owner is going to take that time to win over fans, which I think he is doing in some respect by throwing money at the club. Mm-hmm. But it's that transition is hard for fans to adapt to and support in the same way. You get some sort of paper fans who come in because money, this, that, and the other. There'll be a lot of that at the minute because they're throwing money at it, and that must mean they're a good club because they're spending loads of money. Doesn't necessarily equate to that. But what I was going to say is when you look at when he took over, he was 10th. the first couple of games he shot up to fourth, was there for a couple of weeks, and it's slowly come down.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's the first time he's dipped below 10th, and I think that was the trigger point of this is what it is. But it's a case that I think they've struggled to score that because they were on at the weekend. I think they hit the post 3 times. They've done that in a number of games, and it's like, well, had those shots gone in, they would have been in a far better position. And it was slowly turning, but again, as a business, you've got to make that decision. They've got a really hard run of games now, which is to finish off the season. And whoever comes in, I don't know if they will appoint someone between now and the end of the season, or whether they'll bring him in as of sort of a bit like Manchester United did. He's not coming in now. We know he's coming in, but he's not going to start until the summer. But yeah, it's a difficult one. It really is. I like that.
Sorry, I was just going to say I did hear on the radio today that the guy that's kind of like the interim manager was or is Graham Potter's second in command, has obviously been there with him whilst he was at Brighton, and apparently he was Graham Potter's recommendation for the rest of the season. And they actually raised a good point, obviously, with the. Apparently, this guy's only been in coaching for the last 4 years, has only known, obviously, the tactics of one manager, obviously working beside Graham Potter for the last few years or whatever. So is there going to be a big enough change for Chelsea? Because obviously he's going to have the tactics that he's been working on for the last 4 years or whatever. Is there going to be much of a change for the Chelsea dressing room, or do we just go sod it, we'll completely write this season off and we'll go again next year once we've got a new manager in?
I think it's one of those that he's going to be, certainly the first couple of games will be, look, as a team, as players, you've been underperforming. Go out and impress, because one or two things is going to happen. We're not going to get Champions League, which means some of you might want to leave. And the only way you're going to get moved to a decent club is to play well.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going to win the Champions League and you're trying to impress a new manager. Or if we don't get in the Champions League, you're trying to impress a new manager. So you want to stay and play for this club, which is going places. I don't think there's any doubt that next season, the season after that, they will still be up there.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't impress and you're not putting in the effort, new manager ain't going to want you.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of players that need to leave to balance the books, do other things. You're going to be gone, and actually, you're in a Chelsea team that at the minute is bottom half of the table. So you need to impress, because otherwise you're going to be playing at bottom half of the table clubs on less wages than what you're on. And I think that will be enough to give some of them a kick up the bum. And I think we'll see some stellar performances for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I was saying to one of my mates earlier, I think it's possibly come at the wrong time certainly for us, because obviously we've got Chelsea in the not too distant future. So it would be interesting to see the types of performances they're going to be putting in over the next couple of weeks. And is this going to be one of the games where we kind of get derailed from the title contention? Obviously, it does remain to be seen, but we'll see what happens. So. And there was obviously another departure from the managerial position, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast. Brendan Rodgers has left Leicester City by mutual consent. Has been there since the 2018-2019 season. Yep. Average points per season over the last few years is average win percentage. Whilst he was manager of Leicester, was 42.4%. And this season alone, they've only managed 25% of their games that they've won this year. They've had quite a few draws and even more losses, which was, I didn't actually realise quite significantly how bad that has been this year. When you obviously look at how they've done over the last 5 to 10 years, they've not been too bad. Obviously, they've got a title-winning season in there as well. FA Cup winners and Community Shield winners, certainly under Brendan Rodgers. Do you think that that's the right decision for the club, or do you think that he should have just waited out to the end of the season?
I think they're doing what lots of people are doing. They have ability in their squad. They have some real decent players, and let's take a chance, because if we carry on the way we're going, we're getting relegated. We can't afford to get relegated. So let's twist. If it doesn't work, we've tried. It's one of those that they didn't really recruit, did they, in the summer? You think recently, since they won the title, obviously they've had a lot of players retire, a lot of big players leave. Maguire left, Chilwell's left, Fofana's left, Kasper-Schmeichel's left. Jamie Vardy isn't as sprightly as he once was. I think he's almost 36 now. So it's not like he's like in his prime. And they I think they brought in one or two players that were not well known. So not to say that can't work, but it's a big leap to go straight into the first team and play really well all 38 games. I think Brendan Rodgers is a little bit overrated, if I'm honest. I don't particularly rate him as a manager, and I think that's the way he just comes across in how he speaks. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but for me, he's not stellar. So I think once players have sort of down tools a little bit, which what it seems like at Leicester, let's be honest, I don't think he's the man to coax them back into working hard again. I think he can be probably quite the disciplinarian. Is that the right word?
I know
You know what I mean. But yeah, it's one of those. You think the season before Leicester won the title, they were a point off getting relegated. Had they not had that little purple patch, and obviously recently, I think they won the FA Cup, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Had they not done that, would it be a surprise they're fighting a relegation battle? I don't think so. Obviously, the owner died, didn't he, in that tragic helicopter crash,
Mm-hmm.
and his son took over. And he's done bits of what his dad did, but he hasn't got that same love and passion for the club, I don't think. That what his father did, put in as much money in and things like that. I think it might. They're probably the next team to maybe change hands, if I'm totally honest. But yeah, I think from Leicester, it's we've got to change something. The training's not changing, the formation's not changing, the results not changing. Let's change the manager. See how that how we fare after that. Will it be good for them? I don't know, but I think quite similarly with Everton, they're looking for that little boost, that someone to make them work. Would it be surprised if Graham Potter went in there straight away? No. But again, with the players, they're looking at. There's a lot of quality in that squad when they're fit.
Well, this is something I heard on the radio actually today, that apparently Leicester had already approached, or have already approached, Graham Potter, and apparently he's turned it down, saying it wants to take a bit of time out of the game. I would think for the remainder of the season, gather his thoughts or whatever, and go again. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be short of offers. Especially when we saw what he was doing under the latter part of his Brighton managerial career. I think he's got the potential to be a great manager, but just going back to Graham Potter, I do think that was a bit of a step too far for him at this precise moment. Not saying that in a few years' time he couldn't be at that position, but I think he needed at least possibly like a Spurs or something in between before going onto a Chelsea position.
It's one of those that's like once in a lifetime. If you turn it down, you may never get the opportunity again. So you can't say no to it, really, can you? Even if it's too soon or you're not ready, that call's only going to come once.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And again, I would probably be in the same position if someone like that approached me for a position similarly to what I'm doing now, but obviously being paid a lot more money, more prestigious firm or whatever, then you'd be stupid not to take it. But yeah, so obviously 2 sackings in the Premier League this weekend, the 11th or 12th in the Premier League already this season, which is crazy because that's effectively like over half the league have changed the managers. Now, one thing obviously I wanted to touch on was the title race. Obviously hotting up. We are now into the run-in. 9 games to go for Arsenal, 10 for Manchester City. It's getting a little bit spicy. It's obviously Manchester City beat Liverpool. I'd say they were a bit ropey in the first half. Second half, absolutely dismantled Liverpool, and I think Liverpool were unlucky, possibly not to be 2 up in the first half anyway. But did you manage to see the game at all?
If I'm honest, I watched a few highlights. I know they were. I listened to some of it. I know they were without Erling Haaland.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the second half they did come out swinging. Had they had him, would it have been a different game? Would they have relied on him too much? Or it's hard to say whether in that situation you'd make them better or worse. But they did go through it, and I'm not surprised if I'm totally honest. Have they got enough to catch you? I don't know. But I think the pressure now is on Arsenal not to slip up, and I think that's somewhat a more dangerous position to be in because you are so far ahead.
Yeah. It's I see it from both sides. Obviously, you know me. We've had countless of discussions already this year. Again, go and check out our previous videos. You can see what bit I'm about to come on to. I've said it so many times. Obviously, I don't want to get too ahead of myself until it becomes mathematically impossible for us to lose it. And then I'll start believing. But you just worry that there's going to be this one or two kind of like run of games where we kind of fall off a cliff a little bit, and then obviously City are right back in it. But I suppose on the other hand, we've just got to equal or better Manchester City's results. I know they've got the game in hand, so the game obviously it could go back to 5 points, but they've got to win that game yet, whoever the game in hand is.
Against us. I don't fancy a chance. They outclass us from start to finish. We've got a lucky set piece. I don't fancy our chances on beating Man City this year.
Oh, mate, well, then you're just a selfish prick.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
No, yeah, but again, anything can happen. We've seen some crazy results, crazy fixtures this year. Obviously, Everton couldn't buy a win at the time they played us. I know they had a new manager or whatever, and therefore the new manager bounced, but beat us quite convincingly in that game against Everton. And it's so I wouldn't necessarily say it's an impossibility, but you would say, obviously, given their squad depth, the quality of the players that they have, yeah, the gap's going to be reduced to 5 points. But again, they've got 3 times as many games as us. Obviously, they're still fighting in the Champions League. They're still fighting for the FA Cup and to maintain a position in the Premier League. There's going to be some squad rotation over the course of the next couple of games. And it may kind of play into our advantage, which, going back to previous weeks, I've been quite open, honest, and said that I wouldn't be disappointed, given the position that we're in, if we get knocked out of the FA Cup, if we get knocked out of the League Cup, if we were to come out of the Europa League, I wouldn't be disappointed because of the position we're in. Obviously, come to the end of the season and we don't finish top, I will wholeheartedly be disappointed because of where we've been for a large part of the season. But I wouldn't necessarily say.
Go on.
I was just going to say I wouldn't be devastated because everyone expects Man City to win it anyway.
Yeah. So my question being to you, at the beginning of the season, you said if we get top 4, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need to be for this season to build on that, getting back in the Champions League. So if you would finish second, and as you said, trophyless, would that be a failure of a season, or would that be a success of a season that you actually your target was top 4 and you finished second?
I suppose it depends on the points difference, and it's going to be a massive bitter pill to swallow if it is that we lose by a point or whatever when the Premier League have already come out. And I was speaking specifically about that game against Brentford, where they've already confirmed that they've made a cock up and denied us those points. So that's the bit that will kind of aggravate me if it comes down to the end of it. And again, I don't think you've got to look at it as a success for how well we've done for the remainder of the season. And when you listen to pundits, you speak to opposition fans or whatever, the majority, I wouldn't say all of them, the majority are saying that Manchester City are still going to win the league. Arsenal are going to have their blip. But I'd say in Arsenal's defence this year, every time we were expecting to have that blip, we've kind of got through it. So the game against Aston Villa, where we scored the late game, you've mentioned it a couple of times about it was a Champions winning performance. I think is how you said it, that you find a way to kind of grind out those results. If you're in a losing position, you get to the draw. If you're in the drawing position, you get the win, which is something that we haven't seen from an Arsenal team, and I don't even know how long. But yes, I would be disappointed in the fact that it's ours to lose, but at the same time, we can't be too disheartened because we've come a long way from where we were, even from last season. Possibly our worst season yet for a long while, where we didn't have Champions League football. Europa League football, whatever. But I think it's going to say with some certainty that we're going to be in the Champions League next year. And I would love for us. Sorry, go on.
So I was going to say, does William Saliba being potentially out for the rest of the season have a bearing effect on if you're going to win or not? Or do you think you've got the squad depth at the back now to push through without him? Because his performances this year, there were question marks over him in pre-season, but he's actually come into the squad and his performances have been stellar.
Yep.
And I think he's been one of the most consistent defenders in the league this season. And if you take him out of your back four, is that disastrous, or do you think you can push through without him?
I've got to be honest. For the last couple of games where Rob Holding's come in, I think he's been absolutely brilliant. Whether I can rely on him to do that on a weekly basis, we've only got to look at the Newcastle game last year or the Tottenham game last year. Towards the back end of the season, it was a higher pressure game. We needed to beat Spurs in order to finish above them, I think it was, or to stay above, or whatever it was. And we ended up getting absolutely walloped, 3-0 or 3-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And it was because of him being sent off that we kind of crumbled and we were kind of on the back foot. So from what I've seen of him, where he's come into the fold this year, I think he seems a little bit more level-headed. But at the same time, I do worry slightly that we're going to end up with that sort of performance again, possibly against Newcastle, because that's another tough fixture that we've got coming up. But I would like to think he's obviously aware of the current position we're in, and will do anything not to kind of balls it up. And apparently he's training really well. He's looked quite solid in the last couple of games, and I think when you look at how well Gabriel has played over the last couple of years, again, I think all of our defence have got a little bit of a mistake in them, where they're giving the ball away too cheaply, conceding from set pieces and stuff. We are going to concede goals, but I think he's doing all right in order to kind of fill the position until until Saliba comes back. Now, obviously, if that's going to rule him out for the end of the season or whatever, or whether by some fluke he comes back or whatever from his injury, but who knows? Who knows? There's still a long way to go. I'm going to use every cliche under the sun for, still take one game at a time. Still a long way to go. Blah, blah, blah. Just providing we win the league, I won't go and burn the Emirates Stadium down. So, what?
Well, disclaimer: he's not going to do that anyway, just in case someone does it and you get the blame. So the game on the 26th of April is key then, where you play Manchester City, because they could have clawed a few back by then. It's certainly one of those seasons where, although it's turned into a 2-horse race again, because of how interesting it is hotting up for top 4, and the fact that there are 10 teams in the relegation battle, I think makes it much more interesting rather than the last couple of seasons where we've seen, who's going to get relegated, it's going to be Liverpool and Man City, and I think it's back to the good old days of everything's exciting.
I mean, we obviously made up. Yeah, I was just going to say, we obviously made our predictions at the start of the season. If you want to go back and check that video out, and obviously we did a recap to see how well we were doing against our predictions last week. So again, go and check that video out. Other videos are available in it for our wide selection that we've been going over the last few years. So if you get bored, stick it on in the background. Get involved in the comment section. Leave a comment down below. Like and share it between all your mates. Right, that's the admin bit sorted out. Obviously, we mentioned as well about West Ham coming up against Southampton at the weekend. It was a bit of a 6-pointer game for you guys. You mentioned it, and the reason I wanted to come back to it is obviously you mentioned that you scraped by. Not happy with the performance, or are you just going to take it as it comes at the moment? That 3 points is 3 points.
3 points is 3 points. You have to say it, especially when you're in a relegation battle. It doesn't matter how you win, providing you do. What I would say is he's not going to win any fans over doing that. It was dire. We had less shots than Southampton. We didn't outplay them. They had more possession, more passes. It was a good header, and when it went to VAR, I thought, they're going to rule it out again. They didn't. Thankfully, they come to the right decision, which was interesting because part of the one that the pitch they used when they zoomed right in was so pixelated you couldn't pick out who was what. So it was like, really? But every time it comes down to the wire, it seems that David Moyes pulls something out. There was a few times a number of weeks ago where it was like, well, if he loses this, he's going to get sacked. That was the noises coming out of the club. And he wins. I mean, I've been a big proponent for Moyes for a long time, but at some point you have to change. When you've got the quality of player that we have on the ball, you have to change your style of football. You can't play that long attacking ball because that's not how they play. That's why we're struggling. And the fact that we could have come out and taken control of that game against Southampton, put in some passes, put in some skills, some trickery, got the crowd going, would have won everyone back on side. You could have controlled the game, still won it, but we didn't. We played poorly, and it's not exciting. I'm still not convinced that we won't go down. We've got quite a hard running, I would say, and I don't think we deserve to go down in the fact that the amount that they've put into the club and some of the players we've got at the club, we're not worst around. But I'm just not convinced. I'm not convinced, and I'm not convinced we will win the Conference League as well, which we should, because that by all rights we're undefeated in it. I think we've won 10 on the trot. There's no reason we shouldn't be walking that game to lift up the trophy. But you think we've got to play Leicester last game of the season. That will be a huge game. Same with Leeds the week before. But we've still got to play Brentford, United, City, Palace. They got rid of Vieira, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
They brought it back in Roy,
Big
but,
boy.
but I don't think they're going to be. Yeah, I don't think they're going to be in trouble. If I'm totally honest, I don't think they would have been under Vieira. I think they would have come through the end of that. But again, that's a game you go, oh, I fancy that, but it's never as simple as that against Palace, Liverpool, and then we've got obviously yourselves. Bournemouth is another huge game for us. That's one where I can see us taking points, but again, Bournemouth are fighting for it again. We've got 2 games against Genk, which is not going to make things easier. Newcastle is our next game. They're in good form again now. Made Manchester United look a little bit silly at the weekend. Fulham, I fancy our chances because, as I said, when Fulham will be really good until they're not. I fancy that game at the minute. But yeah, it's just one of those. I can see us maybe 6-9 points tops by the end of the season. And if it comes down to that final day, I don't fancy it. I really don't. And I hope we're safe before that. But it's like you don't want to be going to the final day going, well, if we don't win this game, we're going down. And the fact that it is against Leicester, who currently sit below us, it could well be that it's one of those games that if we don't win, we do go down. And yeah, it's a horrible time to be a West Ham fan. It really is.
So just
It's
to
not nice
summarise, it was just going back to the game or whatever. It wasn't an excellent performance. It was a good performance.
I wasn't even good. It was a win.
A good.
What? Oh, good. Yeah, okay. Go back to my fun at the beginning. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, okay. I'm here all week, unfortunately, for you. Yes. So, yeah. Obviously, we've covered the our two clubs. I wanted to go back to another thing that was mentioned. I think it was either just before or just after the World Cup. Manchester United were flying. Some would say at that particular point. I think it was coming up against us. They went off the rails a little bit. Have pulled out some good results, but it's just to go back on something you mentioned. You mentioned in one of our podcasts about Ten Hag possibly being up for manager of the season. Looking at their performances since the World Cup, I wouldn't necessarily say they've been amazing. I'm sure you've got some stats to back that up. But do you still think he's in for running for manager of the season? Obviously, I know they've won a piece of silverware already this year, but does that?
Yeah, I mean they were the on form team when they coming out of the World Cup. Rashford was hot on it. They won the Carabao Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, they're 9-0 on aggregate in the Premier League, which is not great. I'm sure it will change sooner rather than later. But it's one of those that he could still come out with 3 trophies.
Yeah.
And I think if he does that and finishes top 4 with the issues that were surrounding Ronaldo and other things, I think he's certainly got to be a contender. Because I mean, Graham Potter's not going to win it. 12 of these other manager rivals are out of it, aren't they? And you have to look at like some of them down the bottom. Steve Cooper's still in a job. He's not going to win it. Moyes isn't going to win it. Then you look at Marco Silva, actually they're dropping off a cliff, so they're not going to win it. What's his name? Emery at Villa? No. Klopp? No. Thomas Frank possibly. Or the new guy at Brighton, I can't remember what his name is, Diverge or something. He probably in with they're probably in with a shout. Conte's gone. Eddie Howe probably throw his name in the hat. And then you've got Pep, who's, if they don't win anything, has underperformed. So can you really say that's manager of the season? And Arteta, all right, if he goes out and wins it, it's good. Is it unexpected? Do you know what I mean? Has he gone over and above what he could have done with that team? He's been there for a long time. He's building the squad. He's got rid of Deadwood. He's got them almost there, and this season it's clicked. Well, Manchester United, it's the first season in. Actually, he's turned that around really quickly, while dealing with an odd season, and the biggest player in the world saying, "Do you know what? I'm going to cause trouble here." I don't think that's an easy task. And say along with that, if he wins three trophies for me, I can't see a valid argument for him not to win it.
Okay, that's actually
But
a better response.
he has to win all three.
I thought you were going to come back and eat humble pie, but you've actually made quite a good argument for that.
There are probably four or five managers that I think need to have their name thrown in the hat. If he doesn't win the triple, as in the Europa League, the FA Cup, and now, and they drop out the top four, then I would take his name out the hat. If he finishes top four and even maybe wins a double, I would still say that there's got to be. I can't see a stronger argument for someone else to win it. I can see arguments for people to have a shout at it. I can't see anyone saying, "Well, hang on, he's done this, this, and this. What have they won? Oh, they've not won anything." Or in Mikel Arteta's case, but he's won the Premier League. Okay, but he went out the Europa League. How can you win the Premier League and not compete in the Europa League? Do you know what I mean? Not going to the latter stages of it. That doesn't make sense to me. Are you still in any other cup, or are you out of all of them all now?
Out.
Yeah. So I get the decision to go. Okay, our main focus is there in the Premier League, rightfully so. No issue with that whatsoever. But if he goes on and wins the treble, and dealing with that issue as a new manager in a club with a fan base going, not too sure. I can't see it. Can't see anyone else winning.
So, like I said, I think you've made a really good argument for that. It's for me. I mean, I suppose it depends on what kind of context you look at it. Because if you look at it from the Premier League manager of the season, I think, given from where Arsenal were. So with 2 8th place finishes and a 6th, obviously getting back into the Europa League with under Mikel Arteta. From looking at that to where we are now, and the fact that he's won 4 managers of the month already this year, for me, I think if we were to go on and win the league this year, from looking at the progress that he's obviously taken us on a journey.
Yep.
If we do win the league, I don't think there would be any argument to say why he couldn't get it. They've obviously,
you're right, and I think if that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Is it? I mean, I've never really looked into it. We've never had a manager that's up there. Is it a Premier League manager of the season, or is it a case of it's just a manager of the season overall? I think if you take it just on the Premier League basis, then yeah, I think you've probably got Brighton, Brentford, Newcastle, Arsenal. That's your short list of 4, isn't it? I can't see. Yeah, and then out of that argument is there's no other option other than Arteta to win it, because winning it in style. If you do, potentially. 5 points clear of everybody else, that there's not an argument for anyone else to go, but they've done better, because they haven't. So yeah, it's yeah.
I mean,
we'll find out.
I saw something a couple of weeks ago. There was some stat on Sky Sports where they were talking about that historically the manager of the year goes to whoever's won the Premier League, and to a sense, I get that, because obviously you were the coach at the time for the championship winning team, and I think there's only been one occasion, I can't remember if it was over the last 5 or 10 years, where a manager who didn't win the Premier League has won that particular trophy. But I mean, if you were looking at it from an impartial view, I agree with you with Eddie Howe. Obviously, the transformation he's done with Newcastle. I know there's been quite a few draws, certainly in the recent the last few months. But there's no denying that you can have a look to say where he's taken them from and to. Obviously, they've got new owners as well, and I think it was an absolutely brilliant appointment from Newcastle to get him in. I know he'd been out for a little while, obviously after losing the Bournemouth job, and then obviously going into Newcastle. Fantastic appointment. You can see the difference he's made with their squad, and I think that they will be one of the teams that kind of break the top 6 mould. Certainly over the next couple of the years, because obviously they've got the new backing as well from their new owners, so they've got money to pump into the club, and they've made some really good signings as well. So I definitely can see Eddie Howe in the frame for manager of the season. If you're looking at outsiders from not winning the league, but yeah, just to reiterate the point, I think Newcastle are going to be one of those ones that kind of buck the trend of the top 6 going forward, which will be good. So yeah, moving on. Obviously, we make predictions every week. We have a look at our respective teams' fixtures, and if there's a gem of a fixture, then obviously we will pull that out. So this week we made some predictions on Manchester City versus Liverpool, Arsenal versus Leeds, and West Ham versus Southampton for the very beautiful FIFA Day trophy, which is sitting beside Mr. Varker, their current holder. It's coming home. That's all I'm saying. So we'll go quickly recap on the predictions. So Manchester City versus Liverpool, you had 3-2, I had 2-2. Score obviously was 4-1 to Manchester City. It's a point for you for the correct result, but not for the correct score, and 0 points for me. Arsenal versus Leeds. Arsenal versus Leeds. You were, I'd say, closer out of the two of us. I thought it was going to be a very scrappy game again, with a narrow margin win, like we did on the reverse fixture earlier on the back end of last year. You had 3-0 as a prediction. I had 1-0. The score was 4-1, so it's a point each for the correct result. And now West Ham versus Southampton. We didn't do very well on this one. You had a 2-1 to West Ham. 2-1 to Southampton, and I had a 2-2 draw. Obviously, we have already recapped it. West Ham 1-1-0, so 0 points each on that particular score. So that is 2 points for you for the week and 1 point for me, which moves the season totals up to... I had it
a point closer.
It is. Ian, you are currently on 45 points and I'm on 57. So I've still got a nice 12-point gap over you currently. But like we've already said in the title race, there's still a lot of games to go, still a lot of points up for grabs. And we have 3 fixtures this week. West Ham versus...
points.
Sorry?
9 points for me this week, potentially, and 0 points for you.
Go on then. So the 3 games that we've got West Ham versus Newcastle, Arsenal versus Liverpool, and Fulham versus West Ham. Obviously not all in that order, but that's just the way we've done it. So the first game, West Ham versus Newcastle, you're at home, as you mentioned earlier, on Wednesday night. What are your thoughts on this particular game?
I don't fancy our chances. Newcastle are back in a bit of form. They made Manchester United look silly. They were attacking really well. We didn't play well against Southampton. We did come away with a win. But if we play like that against a team of real quality, then we're going to get found out. The only saving grace is Newcastle don't always travel well to London, or haven't done historically. But I think recently, in the last 2 or 3 seasons, I think they've spanked us for the double both times. I'm going to go with a 3-0 victory to Newcastle.
Okay, I would have to agree with you on this particular one. We've already mentioned that the great job that Eddie Howe's doing with Newcastle at the moment. But again, I suppose it wouldn't surprise me after a victory like that over Manchester United. It wouldn't surprise me if it is a draw. But I think I'm going to go with you. I think I'm going to go for 3-1 actually for Newcastle on that one. And then obviously on Saturday's game, you got Fulham versus West Ham. So we'll go on that one next. Obviously, that's your team. I'll let you take the lead on this one as well.
I think that's an interesting one. I don't know if Mitrovic is back yet. I think he probably is, or isn't he? I don't know. They're falling off a cliff a little bit. They've got 4 losses on the trot now. it's one of those that I think we've got. Have we got the game after that? Is the Europa Conference League? Yes, it is. So I think that's where the priority is going to lie. I can see this one as I want to get points out of this game. I think it's a winnable fixture. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to win. I think if we get thumped by Newcastle, that's going to dip the headlights a little bit. And I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw.
Okay.
I think with the priorities laying elsewhere, it's going to be a draw.
Okay. I'm going to be slightly more optimistic on West Ham's chances on this particular game. Obviously, you mentioned about Mitrovic, and I believe Willian as well was another player that kind of suffered the course of the red card fiasco a few weeks ago. But like you said, they have kind of fallen off a cliff at the moment. I think it's a London derby as well. Oh, do I? I'm going to go for 2-2 actually on this one. Just because I know obviously form goes out the window for a London derby, and I know you just mentioned about the Conference League as well, but I think it's going to be a high scoring game, that one. I think West Ham to score first and Fulham to score last as well, I think. Which leads us very nicely. Sorry?
A little bit of a comeback for Fulham.
Yes.
To bring it back to a draw.
Yep. Which leads us very nicely onto the Arsenal versus Liverpool game. 7 wins on the bounce for us in the Premier League. It's the best run in a while. It's the best run we've had under Mikel Arteta. 7 games on the bounce. I'm under no illusions that this is going to be a tough game because obviously Liverpool are going to be smarting after that disappointing result against Manchester City at the weekend, and they've had a couple of bad results in the Premier League over the last few games. But I know they're not the team that they once were, but I reckon are going to be kind of like a big occasion team. We are playing at Anfield as well. There are no mugs at home. I think this is going to be a bit of a tough one for us, but I do think that we might be able to beat them, which will be the first time we've done a double over them for quite a substantial amount of time. So I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Arsenal on this one.
See, I'm undecided on this fixture. They're at home, haven't they? They've lost 3 on the bounce, but they've all been away fixtures. And the last home fixture they had, I was fairly confident Man United were going to thump them. And they got beat 7-0. I don't think Arsenal are quite going to be that. But you've conceded a lot recently, even if it's one or 2 goals.
Mm-hmm.
The Anfield crowd behind them. I'm going to go... What did you say? An Arsenal win?
2-1.
I'm going to go 3-2 Liverpool.
Okay.
Just to be different. I think it could be... Anfield's never an easy place to play. And the fact that they're due a result, they seem to be horrendous, and then all of a sudden they're good for a couple of games. They've been horrendous recently, so they've got to turn good at some point. Yeah, I just think it could be the start of the derailment of Arsenal, but I think that's going to be a tough fixture for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree, and I do think it's going to be a really close one. It wouldn't surprise me as well, actually, if we lose 2-1, but we have some really shit VAR decision go against us in that particular game. The return of Liverpool.
Yeah, well, I was going to go for 2-2, and then I thought there'll be a dodgy VAR decision somewhere in there for Liverpool, and that's how they get a third.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I do completely agree. It's but it does remain to be seen. Obviously, we'll recap on these scores in next week's podcast. But that's literally everything that I have to discuss this week. Have you got anything else you want to bring up?
No, not Moyes isn't sacked. Day 400 and 956. And everyone's still miserable. No, nothing else.
Yeah, cool. Well, if you have made it this far into the video, thank you very much for sticking with us. Obviously, if you do want to get involved in our conversations, please do leave a comment down in the comment section. As I've already mentioned, please hit that like and subscribe button. Your support is very much appreciated. But until next week, I've been Mike.
I've been Ian.
And we'll see you next time.